We know some amazing people through you, Sonia. All from a string of pearls plant, the first one that showed up. So what we decided to do, Steve and I, was to go look at beautiful plants and not, since we did a webinar that we talked about the basics, we could just review the basics quickly as we walk through some beautiful plants and hope that people have questions that that they want to ask about plants so that we can put them to against the background of beautiful plants. And I'm going to open my chat back up because it closed itself.
We only have one question from Luann. I don't know if we want to address it now or do the conservatory walk and then talk about it later.
Um, I guess without knowing what the question is, I don't, but we're going to see all kinds of different plants, so maybe we'll see something that'll
Okay,
tell us
great.
something. Okay. So most of these pictures, not all of them, but most of these pictures are going to be from a local greenhouse and from Meyer Botanical Gardens Conservatory, which is lovely. It's a beautiful, big, well-maintained conservatory that has things like, I want one. I want a Wardian box to just stuff things into. Look at those beautiful plants. It's just heavenly to look at a Thai plant looking healthy and the peacock plant, I mean, doing just what it's supposed to be doing there. And the inch plant, which used to be called Wandering Tribe or Wandering Jew, is making its way around in there. I just, you see things and you go, yes, I want to do that at home. Or look at this, using little Persian violets and impatiens as shrubs for a miniature city layout. And here is the cypress that Antoinette loves the smell of. That's a Monterey cypress. That's 100 feet tall if it can grow out in California. But if you can give it enough light, here you can keep it as a house pet. And ideas like planting on rocks without soil, because plants can grow on rocks without soil if you keep it moist enough. And as I said, I forgot a couple of things. The ZZ plant is one of the newer plants that showed up maybe 20 years ago. ZZ plants were brought in from, I think, New Guinea. This is a plant that'll grow, pretty much it'll thrive even in a closet. Doesn't need much light at all. Doesn't have much in the way of pests. It has an interesting, its name starts with a Z, both names start with a Z, which is why it's called ZZ plant, but it also has kind of a zigzag growth pattern to the branches that's interesting to look at. But I found this one called Raven, which is a dark-leafed ZZ plant, and I have to thank you all for sending Stephen and me looking at all these plants, because now I'm thinking I gotta find a way to grow some plants inside the house here. So we'll go through the refresher on the basics. Light's the most important thing. And it's because there's too little. If you go right next to your window and use a light meter, you might have 200-foot candles of light there. Whereas outdoors, you've got 1,000-foot candles of light, even underneath trees. So most of the time, we don't have enough light to really keep plants invigorated and able to repair and sustain themselves. So we need to think about how much light we actually have and either supplement it with artificial light or go with plants like the ZZ plant that grow in very, very shady places.
I thought I'd say goodbye.
Stephen is must
Hello,
report.
goodbye.
Steve has to report in as to sit for Santa, sit as Santa.
Yep, and we won't see you till after Christmas, and I wanted to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yeah.
And take care of yourselves.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
So light, you got probably 5,000-foot candles of light even through the opaque cover of the greenhouse. And that makes such a huge difference. It's all energy, not nat energy, but real energy that's causing things to grow like that. So look around and see where your lightest part is, and don't be like me and don't get hooked on only the sunny plants. This is a sedum, not one of the hardy sedums we can grow in our gardens, but it is a sedum. And that orange on its leaves is there because it's getting enough light. If it's not getting full day sunlight, then it's just going to be a kind of an ugly green color. It's not going to have the pretty colors on it. it won't have the lush growth. It is nice to have plants that you can put lights on if you've got little trees. See the Christmas lights on the bark of on the trunk of the palm tree. So light is the most important thing. You just can't do anything about not having light, even underneath a grow lamp. Steve measured the light for me underneath the grow lamp where our streptocarpus is recovering itself. And 3 inches from the light, there's about 300-foot candles. 6 inches from the light, there's 150-foot candles. I mean, it falls off real quickly, so you've got to keep those lights right close above the plants. Water is something that, yes, that's the other thing, the other element that, along with air and sun, a plant uses to make carbohydrates, to make sugars, and to live. But each one uses water in different ways. Jades store water for the entire winter. The winter is dry where they're native in the southern half of Africa. It's dry in winter, and they actually have enough water in their leaves to keep them going through the winter. So with a jade, you actually look at the leaves and don't water it unless it's puckered, unless the leaf starts to get wrinkles on it. Then you go, okay, now this jade needs water. But if you give them too much water, they don't know what to do with it. Cells burst because they get overflowed. Some plants are able to get rid of extra water. A lot of the tropical rainforest plants, like monsteras, can drip extra water out of the tips of their leaves. If there's too much water, they can shed it, and you'll find them dripping on a pretty regular basis if it's too humid. So there's a difference between the plants that want to grow right there by where water is trickling down a rock, where you get a philodendron vine growing up the side of that and just clinging to the water. I mean, just right on the water, and ferns right on the water. And yeah, you're not going to find a lush growth of cactus if it's a good place for cactus, because cactus not only need to have the right amount of water and store it for a certain amount of time, but they also need to have air moving around the outside of themselves. Cactus, most of them, these are not all cactus. There's, for instance, a hybrid aloe haworthia here. A cactus, the spines are the modified leaves, and they don't present very much surface to evaporate. They don't have many ways to get rid of extra water except to allow it into the base, and then the base rots. Some plants tell you string of pearls. I was just intrigued with Antoinette's choice of string of pearls, because they're not an easy one to do. Do you see the gap, a little seam here? You actually wait to water string of pearls until you see that seam starting to close up on the young ones or open up on the older ones. So you actually have to watch, because otherwise the stem does get too full of water and the stem at the base will rot. Water is important if you're growing bromeliads, which are cool plants. I only did one bromeliad, and because the leaves were stiff, I decided I like softer plants. But bromeliads, they get most of their water from the center cup, because they are, for the most part, epiphytic on trees, so they're not rooted in the soil, most of them, and their water reservoir is right there in the center cup. So most bromeliads, you're told to keep water in the center cup, and occasionally dunk the pot, submerge it, let it soak up water, drain it out for 10 to 30 minutes, and then don't water again for quite a long period of time. So each plant has its own druthers for light and for water, and we need to figure those things out. And I hope that you got a shot of energy from Antoinette, who's finding those things out right now, just like you probably once did when you were figuring it out back in the day. Air movement and space are also something, and that's both above and below ground. We tend to forget about the roots of the plants, and the roots of the plants many of them need a lot of oxygen. If the instructions tell you to let a plant dry down between waterings, it's generally because that is a plant that likes to have air flowing around its roots to keep itself healthy, jade being one of them. Most of the cactus are that way. They can handle a pouring down rain that happens once every 10 years and then be fine for the rest of the time, as long as there's air. One of the reasons that we use rock mixes and real coarse mixes on cactus and succulent plants that you put into pots in your house. Aren't they gorgeous though? I do know that there is a beauty to cactus, but I can't seem to keep my hands free of it. And those plants that can grow close to each other in jungles are different than cactus that need some space between them. They're spreading their roots out further underground, whereas these guys, you can get an aglaonema cozied right up to a hibiscus, and the two of them will just spend their time together without really bothering each other at all. You can get a syngonium. What's a syngonium called? Arrowhead. Arrowhead plant can grow crowded in where the air doesn't move at all. If I was in that corner, I think I would be breathless in no time at all. I used to, when putting in wires for telephones for people, be working in the corner behind a couch and the air wasn't moving. And sometimes I felt like I was going to pass out because the air is not fresh. Some plants can handle the air not being fresh and some need to have it. So think about the roots, and that's why we always ask people about, are you growing in plastic pots? Because plastic doesn't breathe well. And for tropical rainforest plants, that might be a good thing, but it's not good for plants that need to breathe. They need to have low fire ceramic that air can pass through. And that's why terracotta is such a wonderful pot to have. Terracotta breathes. And so plants like the crassulas, all of the jades, there's so many different kinds of jades. And echeverias, these are, that's an echeveria and an aloe. We've got another type of crassula, another type of jade coming out the side there. They're all suited to the same kind of environment and they all appreciate having the air go in and out of that pot. It also helps to scrub the accumulated salts when water does evaporate through the wall of a terracotta pot. The salts in it accumulate on the pot, and every once in a while you need to scrub them off so that they are not impeding the flow of air just the same way that a glaze would. And orchids and epiphytes, like staghorn fern, for instance, they only need humidity and moisture. They don't need a growing mix. So just putting them in a pot and tucking some sphagnum moss around them, as long as they can stay stable in the pot, they're fine. And as for problems, so this Thai plants are not easy to grow. See the burn on the tips. And that's probably because of heat. It's something that Thai plants don't like, but other plants here, I've forgotten the name of this one, lemon something, other plants can put up with. So that whole point of putting two plants together in a pot, that is difficult to ask a plant to do. Okay, so when you shop, you have to try to do as I say, not as I do. I look at, ooh, I really like how that looks, or ooh, I really like that other plant over there. Look instead and say, I know I love rosemary. I would love to have a rosemary again, but you need to have high light for at least 12 hours a day all through the winter. And that means you've got to have a really good grow lamp as that rosemary gets big in order to keep it alive and doing well. A lot of people say they die in the winter. They're just not hardy, and that's not true. People say don't water them in the winter because they get wet and rot. We watered ours and kept it alive through the winter for 25 years. Just light is all the difference. So I love succulents. And I lived in a house before that had a great big south-facing window with no shade on it at all, and could grow jades and echeverias and kalanchoes. So I tend to gravitate toward those plants. Ponytail palm is also a desert plant. And I have to tell myself, stop that. You need to be over here looking at the plants that live in lower light. Kalanchoes, anything that has, not only do they have fleshy leaves, but they have fuzz on the leaves, which those are both mechanisms to store water and avoid losing water. They should be telling you that this is something that I need to have growing in a very, very warm, very light place. But I do love them. and they do bloom. I've not seen a graptosedum before, but I thought, oh, I have to get one of those, and I'm resisting the urge every time I go to take pictures for one of these webinars or for something that we're writing. I think, oh, I'm gonna have to come home with a plant. No, you don't.
Can
Senecio, yeah.
I ask a question that might be sort of timely, but also just to give a little bit of the back and forth that Steve would normally offer. So my practice with houseplants and Janet knows, I have a big window, but it's north facing, and it is not the light that it could be. But over the summer, all of my houseplants live outside on a very, very sunny deck. Is there uh, is there any banking of that light that is done? So if other people have a similar situation where indoors it's not great, but an outdoor season, does that bank anything, or is that not helpful?
I don't think it helps them recover from the lack of energy in the wintertime. And so you get more growth then, but it doesn't actually bank it because everything that the plant takes in, it tries to use. It makes more roots, it makes more stems, it makes more leaves. And when you bring it into a shadier place out of the light, it's going to lose some stems or lose some leaves. It's going to thin itself out. So I don't think it works that way. It does work on a 2 or 3 week basis. You can rotate plants around in a house. You can put them in the bathroom, a nice sunny window in the bathroom, and they like the humidity, and you can leave them in there for 3 weeks and then rotate it out and put another one in there. And as long as you keep the rotation short enough that it doesn't get weakened by being in a not so great place, then you can keep doing that. People do that with orchids, for instance. They'll bring them out when they're blooming and then move them back into a different growing situation to get them to rebloom. Okay, so those are, if you are not familiar with those basics and want more on that, then webinar 87 was our basic indoor plants. This is more having fun, walking through and saying, oh my gosh, look at those palms. Wouldn't you love to walk underneath that in your house? Not that I want to move around a pot that's that big, but it's almost like you're looking through a dressing window at a diva there, looking at the corn plant behind the frond of the palm. I don't know which palm that is. You want to have a bigger house just to have things like that. That croton is like screaming color. And the aglaonema next to it, what's aglaonema called? Chinese evergreen. They're just beautiful together. You can do all the same things you do in a garden using the coarse texture of the bigger leaf and the finer texture. Yes, it's a bigger plant, but the finer texture of the smaller parts of the leaves makes it more of a mass and a great background for those big leaves of the croton here and the aglaonema there, and for that Swiss cheese plant, that philodendron. Look at that. The bigger the leaf, the more it's getting more light. We had Monstera in our front sunny window. It grew around the edges of the window, and it would hang leaves down sometimes into the window, and they were monstrous leaves, monstrous. They also dripped water on the cat, and the cat didn't like it. But being able to pick from all these unusual plants now is great, even though some of them don't make it, even though some of them become, well, I tried it, didn't make it. It's nice to have them there. And it's nice to know I like to walk in a conservatory to see how big they can get. I mean, this croton is probably about 7 feet tall. And when you look at that little, unpreprocessing guy there on the bench, you go, can you actually be a bush? Yes. They make great outdoor. I used to put our croton out in the ground over the winter time because it would get a bigger root system and get bigger. And then I just cut it back and bring it in the house again. You also find out which things this is, uh-oh. Darn, now I've forgotten the name of it. It's an aspidistra, and I've forgotten what its common name is. But seeing them in a conservatory is when you realize that, boy, it's kind of nice to put them in a pot because I don't want it to run. This isn't running. It's actually spreading like the ground covers that we don't like in gardens that get too full of themselves. And it's good to go and see in other places that you're not the only one that has problems. You're not the only one that has honeydew building up on leaves from insects sucking on things ahead of time. It's nice to talk to other people. At conservatories, if you can find a gardener working there, you're going to find out that they're using a lot of biological controls because public conservatories do not want to close themselves, and there are reentry intervals for a lot of the things that might have to be sprayed in the old days that would cause them to have to shut the conservatory down. So instead, they use releases of ladybugs and green lacewings and predatory mites and mealybug destroyers. It's pretty cool. And once you know and talk to somebody about that, then you start seeing things like you'll see the tag that they left where they place the predatory mites, for instance, because they're looking to see how wide an area they had an impact on. I was looking around for where the sky flower was. I said, "Where's the sky flower?" It says the sign says sky flower here. And then we found one blue flower, then looked up and found that there was a 20-foot thick vine growing all over sky. Yes, it doesn't want to grow on the ground, it wants to grow up in the sky. It's just endless variations and variations on form of growth as well that people are finding and propagating now because there's money in it, because they can sell these things to so many people getting interested in it. It's just like a breath. It is fresh air coming from plants. The spider plant has a big reputation as being an air cleaner plant, but all plants are actually cleaning air for us. They're all taking in carbon dioxide and breathing out the oxygen molecules that they separate out from the water and the carbon dioxide. You didn't used to be able to, 25 years ago, you couldn't buy orchids unless you were somebody really special, and then you bought little tiny things that you nursed along. The whole science of tissue culture and cloning plants has come so far that they're making thousands of orchids all the time. You don't even have to feel bad about growing it just until it finishes blooming and then throw it away and get another one. Put it on the compost. It's going back into the system. I don't know orchids well. I would have to read a tag to know the difference between a Phalaenopsis and a Cymbidium, and those are the only two groups of plants. The Phalaenopsis is a bunch of species, and Cymbidium is a bunch of species, and those are pretty easy to grow. People should be able to grow those, but there are also orchids and hybrids of other types of orchids that really require very special changes in temperature, like it has to be a certain temperature at night and no more than 10 degrees warmer during the day, and the night length has to be a certain length for them to bloom. And that's more than I want to get into, but it's interesting to see real orchid people get into it.
I just wanted to jump in while we admire the beautiful orchid there, that we are 2 minutes till 10. So I wasn't sure
Okay.
if there was going to be there's a couple of sort of questions or suggestions and whether
Let's do the questions and suggestions, because
yeah.
all what I have other than this walk is I have the pictures that are supposed to be on the chart, and I'm going to find a way to put them on the chart because it was just too cool to be able to click and say, there's what it looks like. So what questions do we have?
So there's a question from Luann that she brought in a citrus tree that looked beautiful over the summer. All the leaves promptly fell off. I'm not sure how much to water it over the winter. She does have a grow light on it.
There are a number of plants that are very sensitive to change in temperature and light. The ficus will do that too. Will drop leaves. It should grow back, and as it does, the grow light's going to help it do that. But without any leaves on it, it doesn't. It has to start growing leaves before it can use more energy. So don't expect something real quick on it. Citrus is an evergreen normally, and when an evergreen loses its leaves, it's using all of its reserves to push out dormant buds. And as they grow, if they're in good light under your grow light, they will get bigger, and then they'll eventually be able to fuel more leaves being made, but it'll be skimpy for a while. Probably it was the change in light that did it, because it is a lot less light inside than outside. But it's pretty hard to kill an orange citrus tree entirely. Did you send us I had a question about that from someone who signed themselves Mom of a Lemon Tree. But I can't find the email now to know exactly what the issue was, but she was also having trouble keeping them through the wintertime.
I was going to say regarding the citrus as well that you're talking about dangerous plants and sort of surprisingly, like agave is dangerous. I was buying my friend a citrus tree for Christmas, and I don't think I'd ever realized that
All
many of
parts
them,
of,
almost all of them, were spiky and like subtly spiky, so dangerously spiky. So you don't even notice until suddenly you've been jabbed.
yeah,
Yeah.
by very hard thorns. Yes, yeah.
Luann is saying it is getting a few tiny leaves now. Her
Right, and so it's a geometric progression, Luann. A leaf that's an inch by 3 inches can make enough energy to make another inch by 3 inch leaf in a month or so, maybe even a couple of weeks if the light's good. But if it's put its energy into making what it can, and it makes little leaves that are just 1 inch by 1 inch, it's going to take them time to make another inch leaf. But then once there's three of those leaves, then they can start producing at a higher rate, a speedier rate. It is a geometric thing, kind of like what is it that always throws me off, that if I had $1 and I double it every day, you become a millionaire in X amount of time. The whole doubling thing is hard to get your head around.
and Luann hasn't the watering. How any suggestions on that?
Okay, well, a plant can only use as much water as its leaves can take up and break apart. So when a plant is recovering, you water it less often. You still water it all the way. You still water the whole pot to get it moist all the way through all the root system, but you're going to find that it's not using the water as much. So start backing off, lifting the pot to see how heavy it is, or putting your hand in to see whether or not it's moist, it's cool, but don't water once a week. If you used to be watering once a week, you're going to have to let the plant tell you how long it takes it to use the water that you give it, but you still wet it all the way through. Same amount of water, just less often.
Um,
And
Anne
don't
says
worry.
Anne says when a big box store isn't doing well, maybe a big a big box store. I don't know if AI did something weird with that. And when it isn't doing well, I often find a small netted plug below the surface without many roots growing through it. Oh, I see. A plant from a big box store. A small netted plug below the surface without many roots growing through it. Should I pull the plug, cut it open?
Pull the plug and cut it open. Those things are awful. I found them sometimes 3 years in the ground. It's one of the main reasons that I think the golden satin grass, Hakonakoi, is a slow grower, is because they're produced in those little plugs and they never get out of them. I'm always slicing those. Any impediment to the roots spreading is an impediment to the plant growing. Fertilizer is something that you hold off on. A plant can only use fertilizer when it's growing, and it can only use it in the amount that it's getting in water. So don't think that fertilizer is going to make a plant grow faster. It's Fertilizer is vitamins. It's not sugars and starches, and sugars and starches are what they grow on. I asked Steve for some beautiful pictures. I said, it doesn't matter what plant they are. Let's just walk and look. Pilea, cool plants. I mean, does that look like it's actually in motion or what? It's a beautiful section. Ivies of all kind. I draw the line at ivies, even though they grow in such shady places. I hate having to keep finding places for them to grow and extend themselves into. It's like we moved a friend's mom, and we had to unwrap her window from the pothos vine that had been looped around and around and around the window, because her mom said no, we couldn't cut it. We had to bring the whole thing. It took time. And the calatheas, which are called peacock plants, there's several species of them, are just spectacular plants and really pretty easy to grow. Thai plants, on the other hand, are not. Tougher to grow. Agaves and haworthias. deadly little
It's like
plant.
the fractal thing, the what is it, the Fibonacci sequence. There,
Yes, yeah, yeah. I prefer the aloes. Most of the aloes don't have thorns. And there are so many aloes, black aloes, red-edged yellow aloes, you name it. Euphorbias are all rather vicious plants, crown of thorns, and this one is Euphorbia millii, which is a firecracker plant. Forgotten the name. But yes, it's worth spending the energy to grow plants in your house just so that you can see some of the variety in nature, and you don't have to limit yourself because of the big push that's gone on now, people buying plants. You can find these things that we couldn't find before. And even though you might be limited to, as we are here, plants that grow in dim light, there are still a lot of variety of plants that we can choose from. We just have to not get hung up on wanting to grow things that grow in the sun. Yeah, see, every one of those hairs is a leaf on a
is
cactus.
that so? Speaking of hairy, Judith is saying, what is that gorgeous hairy plant with delicate flowers that sort of sounds like Hyalea or Hyalea? No.
Is it, she's looking at Haworthias?
I- I-
Haworth. Take a look at Haworthias because they are very pretty. Um, and they are very, very dangerous. Whoops, going the wrong way. I like to see things too when we put it out there and find out that mother-in-law's tongue is just like an iris. They bloom best. I don't know if you've ever had your mother-in-law's tongue bloom, but it's very fragrant. They only open the flowers at night, but they don't bloom unless they're crowded in the pot. And it's that rhizome running around and crowding itself that tells it, okay, it's time to bloom. This is one plant running around the base of the
uh,
tree.
oh, Barbara has come through a Pilea.
Pilea, yes, okay, but yeah, Pilea is I don't know about the hairs. Oh, yes, the Pilea that we showed at the grocery store was a different species of Pilea, but Pilea solieri, I think it starts with an S. Its cousin has the fuzzy, deep embedded leaves. Euphorbias with their thorns on them.
Just we are at almost 10 past 10, so probably time to start
Yeah,
wrapping up.
I'm looking for where I put my jump. I know I put a jump in here. There we go.
It's hiding right there. There we go.
There we go. So we'll leave you with an Echeveria. And I promise, because I really, really, really wanted to have a cool thing like that, that I will get those pictures and we'll figure out what it is that I've got to do to export it properly. And we'll put these beautiful pictures of these plants that you didn't see into that chart so that you can call them up yourself. Coral reef echeveria. So that's all for indoor gardens. The new age are great. And eternal thanks to Antoinette. She is such a firebrand, fire starter. Email or text anytime. Free for all Fridays will start back on January 10th. And
Me and one of my pretty jades will say goodbye as well.
and that is a pretty jade, very pretty jade, marbled. Um, and Steve is working on a traveling garden. He's trying to make the list that will fit in of the must-sees when you're out traveling. So that's on the 10th of January. The Fridays will start again, and we'll send you reminders. Thank you very, very, very much for being here today. And have a nice holiday. Thanks all.